Welcome to the Paul Spradley Show, a show dedicated to real strategies from real people practicing real leadership in diverse and inclusive cultures. And now here's your host, CEO of the diversity training firm, the Care-Based Leadership Collaborative, Dr. Paul David Spradley.
Hey everybody, how the heck are you? I don't know if you notice, but I now have a mustache and little beard, and I look like a completely different person. For those of you who are listening, it is a fully grown baby mustache and beard. Like, it's not really there, but sort of there. It changes my entire look. Listen, I'm so excited that you're with us today. My guest is a good friend from many years ago. He is the life stage pastor, and men's ministry director at Orchard Hill Church out in the Cranberry, Wexford area. Please welcome to the show, Mike Hatch. Mike, welcome.
It is good to be with you, Paul, and I have to boast my
you've got a nice beard.
well-grown beard, actually.
My beard is not well-grown, and it never connects right from my
took me
upper
the
lip to
longest
those
time,
two little... I've experimented with chia pet seeds before. I've used marker.
Right.
All of them make me look silly. So, well, kudos on your beard, Mike.
Hey, it took me a while too. Trust me, you'll get there.
Will I? I've given up.
Yeah.
So, you and I sat on a set similar to this.
That's right.
20 years ago when we were at Robert Morris University.
20 years ago. It was 20 years ago?
It was 20 years ago. I did not have a mustache or beard, and you had a full head of hair.
Yeah, it's right. You had to bring that up. Oh, right, good. Yes, I did. Yes. It was thick, too, actually. It was oh, man.
You used to wave your locks on the show, man. But
that's right.
I feel like we've come a long way since then.
We have. Oh, my gosh, it's been a long time. We both kind of had unique journeys.
Yeah.
And it's fun to kind of come back together again in this new season of life for both of us.
It's a new season of life. We've been, one of the things I like about Mike is that we have reconnected a few years back. So we were very separate from each other. So after college, like, we didn't really connect. And you went to another state and then came back, and we've been meeting with frequency ever since, just because I value the investment. I think that men need to have other men in their lives that they can be authentic with, that they can have conversations with that they don't have with other people. Because we need that in a real way. And so we might get to that today, or in another show. I might have you back for another show. But I do want to really tease out our interaction a couple of years ago. So, you had been back in Pittsburgh for a little bit. I had just come back to Pittsburgh, was here for a little bit. And you reached out to me. What happened? And would you mind just telling me the story? Like, how did you reach out to me? And let's talk about that first experience that we had at lunch.
Yeah. So I'll back up just a little bit and share kind of from my own experience what brought me to that point, I guess. So so I had joined the staff at Orchard Hill, became a pastor there in 2013 was when I came on staff. And around 2014, 2015, I took another young black gentleman aside to kind of mentor and encourage and disciple, basically, kind of spiritually mentor him. And I got to know him a little bit, and at some point, I forget when it was, with the, the riots that were happening. Missouri, right?
So Ferguson, Missouri.
Yes.
That was right around that time.
Yes, it was right around that time. And it just piqued my curiosity. And I just asked him, I said, and his name is Reggie, amazing guy. I said, Reggie, like, how are you feeling about all this? What's going on in your mind with all this racial tension and the things that are going on there, and the way the country is responding to this? And it ended up taking us on a longer journey of discussion that began to really start opening my eyes to race, obviously, but also my own naivete or ignorance in terms of that. And soon after that, a beloved friend of mine, David Bowens, another amazing black gentleman, came on our staff soon after that on the worship team. And he and I had just started to have conversations. And it revolved around the Missouri incident, and actually the Black Lives Matter, as that began to come up around that time as well.
Right.
And
so I want to pause you because for context is important, because right around that same time, so there was Mike Brown in Ferguson who was shot by police.
That's right.
There's Freddie Gray, there's Sandra Bland, and there's Eric Gardner, and all of these people were killed over a short period of time, but there is now video evidence that was talking about these things.
Right.
And so the thing I want to kind of slow down a little bit is the fact that why did you ask your first mentee around his feelings? Like, because you didn't have to, because a lot of people don't, right? They'll say, oh, well, it's unfortunate that that's happening in a state that's far away from me.
Yeah.
Onward with my day. But why did you ask?
Because I realized he came from a different perspective, being Black, basically. And I was curious. Honestly, I was just really curious about that perspective. I realized that as I thought about my own life, I was exposed rarely to people of other races or minorities, basically. Briefly, when I was in high school, there were friends that I had who were Black, but it wasn't like we were super tight. My primary friend group, all white, we were all the same pretty much. And I just didn't know a whole lot about that perspective, and so I was curious about his perspective. And there was actually, it was interesting because I was so I was at an Office Max or Office Depot, I think, and I was dressed in kind of sweats, and I had a hoodie over my head, and was just looking very stripped down and casual in a sense. And I was looking at some of the office desks, and I actually felt this manager following me around. And I realized, I probably look a little suspicious, And then I thought to myself, because I had heard various Black people and Black friends mention that they have had similar experiences like that, where they walk into a store and just simply because of the way they look or the color of their skin, that they will have people sometimes follow them around. And so if I'm honest, I was coming right off that feeling, I think if I remember at that time, and I thought to myself, interesting, I wonder if that's something like what he might be feeling or other people of color or minorities might feel. And so that motivated me toward that curiosity to find out more about his perspective. Does that make sense?
It does. I was going to ask you to tell me why you were curious, but I think that you've done a good job of telling me what happened before then. So you had an incident that prompted you to be curious. But I still don't know if that answers the question, though, right? Because you could have made the choice not to have been curious. Like, you could have had the incident and that just been a single incident. But I think the thing that you did, which we very much encourage in our training, is you had some reflective time where it wasn't just an incident that happened, but you spent time reflecting on that incident and seeing how it connected to other thoughts. Right? Is that accurate?
Definitely. That's exactly right. Yeah, they were definitely. I guess for whatever reason, I don't know how to. So obviously, being a Christian, I reflect on faith. I reflect on my need, my desperate need, in a sense, for God's provision in my life, and so I'm always looking for areas where I'm, weak or I don't know, some areas where
your growth areas.
Yeah, exactly. And this was definitely an area that for me I felt deficient. If that makes any sense. I felt deficient in terms of my perspective.
Interesting. And had you felt deficient before? Was that a thought that come up, or was it in relationship to that incident that sort of spawn your reflection around your deficiency?
I think it was relationship that caused me. Which is interesting you say that. So let me back up because something else just popped in my mind actually. So I remember in Chicago going to a church, and they would have whether it be sermon series or events that were around cultural or multicultural awareness. And one of the things I remember the pastor saying at one point was, you should intentionally seek out friends who are not your race. You should intentionally seek out, and specifically he was talking I think about black people in general at that point. And he says, he mentioned the fact that he intentionally sought out other black people to be able to interact with and to broaden his own perspective. And not that was, maybe subconsciously that was some of my motivation about bringing Reggie along and wanting to disciple him a little bit, but I think that seed was planted years before in that. And I realized, at that point I realized, gosh, I'm so limited in my exposure to different perspectives when it comes to race.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, man. Like I appreciate the fact that you've been on this journey of just realization, because you don't have to. And I think that that's one of the spaces that a lot of colleagues of mine will stay in that space. They'll just stay in the space of, we won't talk about whiteness as being a culture. So when you say, I only hung out with people that look like me and they're all white. And I was like, that's part of a white culture, right? Yeah. And so that also means that you have limited experience and exposure to other cultures, which speaks to value. So when there's organizations that will have, when they celebrate Black History Month, when they celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, when companies celebrate these things, it's because there's not enough representation or conversation, and it's to start to plant that seed that hopefully somebody will say, I am really deficient in my understanding of round blank. And in Pittsburgh, I had a conversation just the other day with an executive director of a nonprofit, and he was talking about how there's a large Bhutanese population in Pittsburgh, a significantly larger.
What is Bhutanese?
Bhutanese is a culture. It's a race of people.
I've never heard of that.
You've probably heard of the mini Nepali restaurants that are over in the South Hills.
Okay.
So the Nepal and Bhutanese, like that, those cultures are very close to each other.
Okay.
And it's giant. It's growing. It's the largest in the United States population of refugees from that part of the world.
Wow.
It's changing the landscape of suburban Pittsburgh, right? Yeah. So you look at Baldwin, Whitehall, so they're just outside of the city because there's been populations of folks who found support. They're coming here, and so now it's creating conversations where people have to say, well, what does that mean for me to engage with a person who is Nepali? Yeah.
See, in Chicago, I lived in Chicago and for about 9 years, and one of the ethnicities that's especially prominent there is the Latino culture. And one of the things that stuck out to me that I learned there about them is their value of family is so strong. And I remember as I would drive from, especially on weekends, I'd drive from one place to another, and you'd pass like a soccer field or a park or something like that. They would have big forest preserves out there, and you would always see Latinos, Mexicans, in the field playing soccer, having a cookout, and just, could be hundreds of them there. And I remember being curious about that, and a buddy of mine was Mexican, and I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, they're all about family. And so, and the interesting thing that he mentioned was that they've less valued about, they value education less. And so it's interesting because the school district they were in performed, I guess, comparatively poorly because that culture, they didn't value that education. They valued family over education. And so it didn't mean that they were bad or they were doing something wrong. It just, that was their priority and their values. And it struck me, I remember at that point, it struck me like, wow, what a different perspective. Yet I also respected that because I know how, as a white culture, how much we value performance and making the grade and succeeding, getting to that elite school, that elite job. And for us, though, it's like the opposite. Family is way down here.
Family's three.
Yes, yes.
There's performing, there's having sort of what is success, and there's family.
Yeah. So I have to say, I guess that bit of interaction, too. It's funny how, as you're talking, like little things are popping up in my mind as I'm thinking about, that probably led to this.
Well, that's the thing. So one of the key takeaways, I think, is the idea of being reflective on your own life journey and your either engagement or deficiency with other people, right?
Yeah.
Like, so when you have these experiences, are you taking note of what happened? When you're in a Walmart and you see a person in front of you being treated poorly, I shouldn't have said the name Walmart because it could be anybody. Like if you're in in a
Right.
store
Yes.
and as a white person you see this injustice or this mistreatment happening, are you simply ignoring it, or are you logging that in and saying, the next time that happens, I hope I have the courage to do this, or I hope I ask questions around the leadership team at this restaurant around like, how are you all learning to navigate, or when I'm in a position to lead, how can I train my employees or my staff to think about everybody with equality and to address this fact that this thing just happened, right? And so
important. We often don't stop to reflect.
We don't.
We don't.
Just keep going.
Just go to the next thing because you're always pushing to.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So I'm talking to Mike Hatch, and he's white. I'm black.
Very.
He's very white. We talked about that. Like, if Mike
Yes.
and I were on stage together, so I come across as very black, right? Like, I have textured hair, I have a broad nose. Mike is very white. Like,
Yes.
and you came in drinking a coffee cup. I was
Yes.
just like, dude, man, like, the only thing that would make you more white right now is if you had on, like, it had a MacBook and some sandals. I don't know. It's cold outside, but
Yes.
It's-
My
it's
MacBook
happened.
was in my car, actually. I didn't bring it in, but you're right. You're right, man. I am very. My wife makes fun of me for being as white as I am sometimes. Anyway, yes. Yes, very true.
I love it, man. So, but I think the thing that, and what's crazy is we haven't even gotten to the story, right? Like,
Right,
so this,
yeah, this is
all of
still backstory, right.
This is revelations of your thought process, and the key thing is that you were reflective, which led to you being curious. So you
Right.
noticed two things that have happened, possibly more. But you noticed at least these two things,
Yeah.
and you started to reflect on them and how they relate to you and people that are now in your inner circle, right?
That's right.
And so you had some moments, and then
Yeah.
you reached out to me.
Yes, exactly. So let me talk about just
Yep.
one or two other moments that led up to this. Because one of our worship leaders at Orchard Hill is David Bowens, and he's he's a black guy, amazing guy, become a super close friend. And he and I had conversations, and for example, the Black Lives Matter thing, I remember he was over at our house, and my wife asked him, like, what is with this Black Lives Matter? Like, doesn't every life matter? Like, the typical kind of response, and he so graciously and lovingly brought in his perspective for us and helped open our eyes, and we left completely changed in terms of, and with a lot more appreciation for what's behind what Black Lives Matter and that whole message. And then he and I had the chance to do a funeral together, and he played the organ, and I think I was just there for support. But he and I went together, and on our drive back, we were, I can't remember where we were, but it was very, rural. It was very rural.
Yeah.
And we had stopped at a Speedway to grab a sandwich or something. And he mentioned the fact that based on where we were, like you could tell it was Hickville. If, maybe that's a bad way of saying it, but maybe I can get away with it being white. I can say that. But it was Hickville. And we pulled up to this Speedway, and I remember him saying to me, "Hey, look, I'm just saying, like, this is out of my comfort zone based on what my ethnicity and where we're walking into. And this may, we'll see what happens in here, and it may be uncomfortable." And I said, okay, it's just to be sensitive to that. So we walked in, and oh my gosh, like it was, I wish I could remember where it was. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but everybody was in overalls. I mean, it looked like everybody was straight off the farm, very white. I mean, the only thing that would make it more like a scene out of Deliverance is if somebody had, like, you know, wheat coming out, holding wheat in there. It was crazy. But one of the things I felt as I walked in with David, and David's a big man. He's a big black guy with the locks, long locks, and I felt everybody's eyes on us immediately. And it was very overwhelming. And it was very interesting. First time I'd ever experienced that. And then we got our sandwiches, and we left, and we got in the car, and we were eating in my car. And I watched as people walked out from the Speedway, and craned their necks, staring at him. It was very obvious, staring at him as they were walking out. And it was the craziest thing. And I'm having this interaction with David saying, oh my gosh, like, look at this. Look at how they're...
What were you thinking at that time as you were seeing this, or what were you feeling?
Oh man, I was definitely feeling uncomfortable. I was feeling awkward. I was feeling angry because he's a good friend. You know, he's a really good friend. I love him and I know him. And to see people look at him, the way I described it was as if they were looking at him as if he was an animal in a cage or something. It's just like something they'd never seen before, you know? And yeah, it was very awkward and it made me a little upset. But the cool thing was we got to talk about that and debrief that whole experience on the way home, which just led to, again, expanding my experience, expanding my perspective on his perspective, if that makes any sense. And we got to talk a lot about more things that played into that too, just being a black man growing up in Philadelphia, in the inner city, to being here in Pittsburgh now. And anyway, so that all those things led up to then us. And so honestly, I was feeling, I think I was feeling woke in a sense. And like, wow, okay, like I'm starting to get, like this is totally different and I'm starting to get this. And I see you on, I think it was on LinkedIn maybe? Mm-hmm. I think it's when I saw you on LinkedIn. And obviously we had a great relationship in college. We hung out doing media, TV stuff before too. Had a blast doing that. And so I was excited to connect with you and everything. And all that, you know, plus the momentum of this new awareness that I felt like was happening, kind of pushed me towards you in a sense and saying, man, I want to get together with him, clearly to reconnect because we had a great relationship and I love you as a friend and a brother. But also there was a part of me that was like, oh man, I really can't wait to learn more and expand my perspective. And so you and I sat down together, Paul, and let's just say it was very clumsy how I...
Yeah, you word vomited on me.
I did, yes.
You said, black people,
Yes, yes.
I'm white and black, and I just...
Yes.
And so,
That's
but I think that there's a couple of... Well, so your take on that experience was what?
Oh, man. So I was so grateful because I realized after tripping over myself several times and kind of realized, wow, listen to the insecurity in me that's kind of just coming out as I'm doing this, and how clumsy I felt interacting with you on when it comes to race. Yet you came alongside me in a way that was extremely helpful, extremely gracious and loving. And I love it because your business is care-based leadership. And that is exactly what you did. I still remember, I can even see your face as you kind of were like, you kind of like, almost like, okay, I know I've got to address this, but like so loving, and you kind of brought me along and said, okay, Mike, look, I really, you affirmed me, you appreciated me for wanting to learn more, but then you also very lovingly helped me to understand how to approach it in a much more helpful, constructive way, where I didn't, where I could feel safe around you and not feel insecure, which, and that's what I'm finding out more and more is fear drives this. Yep. Over and over. And as I was interacting with you in that moment, for sure, I think fear was driving me. And you helped to put my fears at ease, in a sense, by accepting me, caring for me in that moment, which then opened up the ability for us to have more constructive and productive conversations.
And dive deeper. And so, and I think that first conversation was constructive. And I think that, so one of the things I valued greatly about your coming to me was saying, look, I've got some questions, and I think that I could ask them to you in a space. Like, I think that there's a mutual understanding that we were going to protect each other to get to the end of the conversation.
Definitely.
To get to the end of the conversation. And that's a thing that, so sometimes I work in the black communities around sustaining that conversation because I'll have people that look like me that will not be as caring. And the conversation shuts down, and then it shuts down two ways, right?
Yep.
So now they're not having a conversation, and it's also not on black people to carry that burden, to lift that and educate white people. But there is a shared responsibility in this space of coming to terms around the idea of what it means to be white, and to have the choice to be oblivious for much of your life.
Yes.
But when you start to lean in, I think everything that happened with you is what happens when I'm working with white colleagues, right? Like they have this moment of feeling woke because they've had a feeling, right?
Yep.
They've had a reflection. They had this feeling of like, oh man, I got to say something about this, and then they do, and then say, I'm good, like I'm good forever. But the thing is, you don't ever wake up. You're never woke. Like
right.
it's a waking process that is continual, right? Like, and so even though there are folks that will say, yo, I'm so woke. And there's a young lady, I won't say her name, but we were working together at a conference, and she said, I'm just so woke now. And I was like, no, you've had a great experience that started to wake you up, but you will go back to sleep again today, and you'll need to wake up again tomorrow because there's going to be something else. And that's the idea of this being a journey, that as long as you're willing to be on the journey with the other people around you, if you're living in the South Hills, like being on that journey with the Nepalese population and the Bhutanese population, like just asking the questions, you didn't have practice asking the things that you wanted to ask because you just didn't have to for your whole life.
That's right.
And so it came out like you didn't have practice, like it was your first time engaging in this way.
Yeah. And it's funny. Have you ever seen The Neighborhood? This show, there's
No.
a show called The Neighborhood where it's a white family that intentionally moves into a black neighborhood.
That's funny.
And Cedric the Entertainer is
I saw the commercials for this.
He's the black neighbor. And oh my gosh, the hilarity that ensues is fantastic. But there's a moment where Cedric, I can't remember the characters' names, but he asked the white guy to if he wants to come to him to a country club where he's got a pass to go golfing. And the white guy is like, oh yeah, sure, no big deal. Not realizing, and Cedric, his intentions come out later too, that Cedric is looking for that white guy to kind of be with him in that environment of the country club. But then in the process, the white guy ends up seeing how Cedric is treated in certain ways, and then has an experience, and then he overreacts to that. Like, I think he stood up and started like shouting things in like the restaurant of the country club, talking about how people should value black people or whatever it was. But it was a hilarious scene because he definitely overreacted.
We have 60 seconds left.
Okay.
What is the message that you want? Because the thing is, most of the folks that are listening to this podcast have met me at a training, and they say, I don't have conversations like this. I like listening to your show because you're helping me hear things from other perspectives. So they're sitting at home saying, I want to take that step. What's your counsel as a person who's taken the step and has continued to take that step?
Oh, man. It can be hard and awkward and feel clumsy, but it's worth it. It's worth it because you broaden your own perspective, obviously, but also the relationships that God created us differently on purpose. He's a creative God, and our skin color reflects that diversity of who God is. And as we get to know people who are different from us and are humble enough and willing to do that, in my perspective, you get to know yourself better, but also the God who created us better. And we can't be colorblind. You know, a lot of white people are used to saying, I'm just colorblind. No, you're not. God didn't create us to be colorblind. He created us to see the beauty of diversity and to embrace it and grow to appreciate it and love it. And man, there are riches if you're willing to do the hard work that can sometimes be clumsy, but it's worth it. I guess is my thought.
Mike Hatch, thanks so much for being on the show. I'm going to have you back on the show so we can talk some more. That's our time. Visit our website, carebasedleadership.org, for ways that you can learn more about this, hear more conversations, or bring us in to do a training for you. Thanks for watching. Take care.